The wail of police sirens shattered the peaceful morning at my ranch, slicing through the quiet like a knife as I stood by my shimmering lake, watching 3 squad cars roar down the dirt road toward me. I just finished securing my 43-foot Sunseeker yacht Yep, a full-on yacht to the sleek new floating dock I'd built on the southern edge of my private lake, which, let me be clear, is entirely on my own land. The water sparkled under the rising sun, the yacht swaying gently like it was born to be there. But apparently, the HOA had other ideas. Out stepped Officer Ramirez, his hand resting casually on his belt, followed by a familiar figure charging across the field in a storm of dust and outrage. It was the Karen Sandra Wiles, the iron-fisted HOA president of Sunridge Hollow, the upscale gated community across the way. Picture her, wide brim hat, beige slacks so tight they could double as a tourniquet, and a scowl that could make a coyote rethink its life choices. She jabbed a manicured finger at my yacht and declared, "That's a maritime safety violation. You can't just park a boat in a ranch pond." I blinked, holding back a laugh. "First, Sandra, this isn't a pond, it's a private lake. Second, I didn't park it. I sailed it." The officers exchanged puzzled looks. One politely asked for an explanation while the other scribbled notes like I'd just robbed a bank. Karen, undeterred, ranted about zoning laws and visual pollution, whatever that's supposed to mean. I kept my cool, but then she dropped the bombshell that made my blood run cold. "If that floating eyesore ain't gone in 24 hours, the HOA will file for lake rights control and claim that entire water body for the association." That's when a slow grin spread across my face, because what she didn't know was about to change everything. Which city in the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you've had any run-ins with an HOA we'd love to narrate your story on our channel. Didn't know was that 6 minutes before they arrived, I had just signed the paperwork transferring ownership of the entire Sunridge Marina, the one the HOA uses for their boats and events, into my name. Yeah, I bought their marina and I hadn't told them yet, but I was about to. Before I reveal what happened next, let me take you back a bit, so you understand how we even got to this bizarre moment. You'll want to stick around for this one. It gets wild. Now, before we dive in, let me ask you this. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know if you're team mind your business or team call the cops on a yacht. And don't forget to like and follow if you've ever wanted to see a Karen get stunned into silence. Alright, let's rewind. My name is Derek Foster. I'm a retired firefighter, 56 years old, divorced, and owner of a 120-acre ranch just outside of Lake Marigold, Texas. I've lived here for 11 peaceful years with my 2 golden retrievers, Buddy and Samson. I like fishing, fixing tractors, and playing the saxophone on my porch when the weather's right. The lake on my property, it's man-made. I dug it up myself with a small crew over 2 years, filled it using a rainwater collection system, and stocked it with catfish, bass, and bluegill. I paid all the right taxes. It's my private lake, my private land, everything legal, everything calm. Until Sandra Wiles moved into the Sunridge Hollow development across the road. She was trouble from day one. She knocked on my door the first week she moved in, asking if I could kindly remove the dead tree visible from her upstairs window. The tree was on my side next to my barn. I told her no. She called code enforcement. Then it was my horses making too much noise at 6 a.m., then it was the smell of fertilizer, then it was my Sundays as concerts, just me and my saxophone. But the final straw for her, the one thing that made her lose her home mind, the yacht. Now, let me be honest. I didn't just buy the yacht out of nowhere. It was a retirement gift to myself. I'd always wanted one. Ever since I was a teenager flipping through boating magazines in the waiting room of Dr. Benson's dental clinic, I dreamed of owning a big, beautiful yacht. But life took me on a different course. Firefighting, marriage, bills, a mortgage, and later a bitter divorce that left me emotionally drained and financially tight. So, when I finally turned 56, sold an old property I'd inherited from my uncle in Arizona and had enough money saved, I thought, why not? Now, most folks would dock their yacht at a real marina. But I wanted to wake up, walk outside in my boots and boxes, sip coffee on the deck, and admire that yacht sitting right there on my lake. So, I built a dock, had the yacht delivered by a hydraulic trailer, winched it into the lake. Simple, but when that yacht appeared on the lake one Tuesday morning, Sandra Wilds called the HOA board into a frenzy. You'd have thought I'd parked a space shuttle next to her lawn. They started sending letters, demands, threats of lawsuits. Now remember, I don't live under the HOA. My land is separate. I'm not in their jurisdiction. But that never stopped Karen, I mean Sandra. One letter read, due to the visual incongruity presented by your water vessel, we are escalating this to county oversight. Another said, failure to remove the structure may result in forced community integration. What does that even mean? I ignored most of it, but then came the real twist. One afternoon, a friend of mine named Jacob, a local real estate agent, called and said, you wouldn't believe what just came on the market. What? I asked. The Sunridge Marina, the HOA's pride and joy. Turns out the owner had been quietly trying to offload it for months, and the HOA never had the funds to buy it. So, I did. Cash signed, sealed, and recorded 6 minutes before the cops showed up at my ranch. But back to the story. Before I could drop the bombshell, Sandra started yelling louder at the officers, saying I was an unstable threat to water aesthetics, whatever that means. She even tried to step onto the dock to inspect my yacht, and that's when Buddy growled and scared her back 5 feet. The officers, bless them, were trying to stay professional, but you could see it on their faces. They were tired of her, too. Then one of the officers walked toward me and said, Mr. Foster, are you aware of the HOA's petition to claim shared jurisdiction of this lake? I nodded. I am, and I'm also aware that in exactly 30 seconds, the HOA will be receiving an email that changes everything. He tilted his head. What do you mean? I just smiled. Then my phone buzzed. Email sent. And that's when Sandra's phone dinged. She glanced down, her face froze, her lips parted. Then she screamed, You bought the marina? I raised an eyebrow. Yep. And just like that, the screaming stopped. The cops didn't move. Sandra didn't blink. The silence was loud, but I wasn't done yet, because what Sandra didn't know was that I had plans for that marina. Plans that would make the HOA board rethink everything they'd ever done to push me. Plans that were already in motion. And just as I turned to head back toward the ranch house, a truck pulled up fast on my gravel driveway. The door slammed. Man jumped out waving papers in the air. I squinted. And then I realized who it was and what he was holding. Oh no, not that document. The man walking toward us fast and furious was Craig Mulvaney, the HOA's vice president, a short, stocky man, with a deep frown line that could slice bread. He always wore sweater vests, even in summer, and carried clipboards like they were shields in battle. But this time, Craig wasn't holding a clipboard, he was holding legal documents. Derek Foster, he barked, waving the stapled papers like a lasso. You can't do this. You can't just waltz in and buy our marina. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't waltz. I paid. You manipulated the system, he shouted, spittle flying. You bought the marina to provoke the HOA. Actually, I said calmly, I bought it because your president tried to intimidate me on my own land. This was just poetic justice. Craig's face turned red. I could see Sandra behind him checking her phone like she couldn't believe what she just read. Her lips moved silently, probably rereading the line that said, effective immediately, full ownership and management of the Sun Ridge Hollow Marina has been transferred to Derek Foster. The officers were still standing in place, clearly unsure whether they were witnessing a civil dispute, a mental breakdown, or an episode of some hidden camera reality show. You see this? Craig growled, jabbing the paperwork toward me. This is a stop order. We filed for a temporary injunction. You can't float a commercial vessel on inland freshwater without regional inspection. I chuckled. This ain't a commercial vessel, Craig. It's my weekend retreat. And this water, my lake, unless your injunction applies to privately owned, spring-fed lakes, you're wasting ink, he stuttered. But you can't just live outside the community's visual norms. You're hurting property values, buddy. My dog barked once in agreement. Or maybe he just wanted to pee. I turned to Officer Ramirez and said, "Am I breaking any laws?" The officer scratched his head. Technically, no, sir. As long as the water body is legally yours and the vessel is registered, you're fine. Craig and Sandra both exploded at the same time. But let's rewind for a second. How did I get to the point where I had enough money and motivation to buy an entire marina just to prove a point? Well, here's a little secret. Before I retired, I didn't just fight fires. I invested. I was part of a silent partner group in a tech firm that developed wildfire detection software. We sold the patent to a government contractor 3 years ago. My name's not even listed on the official paperwork, but my bank account noticed. I kept living simple. Most people around here had no idea I was sitting on 7 figures. But that's how I liked it. See, there's a strange thing that happens when people think you don't have money. They start treating you like your piece isn't worth much, like Sandra and her HOA crew. Let me tell you about one particular evening 2 months ago. It was around 8 p.m. The sun had just dipped below the trees and I was sitting on my porch with my feet up, saxophone in hand. The crickets were singing back up and I was halfway through a smooth rendition of Summertime when a pair of blinding headlights rolled into my drive. It was Sandra in a golf cart. She honked once, then stood with her arms crossed. "I need to speak with you," she said. I put the sax down slowly. "Evening to you, too. I've reviewed the notes from our last board meeting," she continued, "and we've decided that your lake is a visual liability to our community image." I almost laughed. "It's a lake, Sandra. It's ugly, Derek, a natural mess. Unsculpted, unregulated, no safety markers. If a child were to wander," I cut her off. "No children live on my land. That doesn't matter." She snapped. "Your lake sets a bad example. We'll be submitting a petition for shared oversight." That's when I realized it wasn't about a lake or a yacht. It was about control. They couldn't handle someone living freely next to their prim hedges and manicured cul-de-sacs. So, I decided to push back quietly. I started by calling Jacob, my real estate friend, and asking him to look into local properties that the HOA relied on but didn't own. The Sunridge Marina came up within minutes. The owner had grown tired of the board's endless complaints, and they were looking for a quick sale. The price, just under $680,000. I didn't even blink. Now, back to the present. Craig was still waving his papers and trying to force the officers to act. Sandra had retreated to the edge of the dock, eyes glued to her phone, trying to make sense of the disaster unfolding. "Look," I said, raising my hands for calm. "I'm not trying to pick a fight here, but I will say this. If the HOA wants to launch any future boats from their marina, they'll need to send a request to me." The silence was deafening. Even the wind stopped. The idea that the entire Sunridge community would now have to ask me for access to the water they prided themselves on. That shook them. "You can't do this," Sandra shrieked. "Actually," I said, "I already did." Then my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Jacob. "By the way, looks like they forgot to renew their insurance policy. Marina access liability now falls on you. Just FYI." That's when I knew I had them completely. But just as I was about to say something, we all heard a loud crack, then a shout, and suddenly the dock began to tilt. Sandra screamed as her feet slipped out from under her. Craig lunged to help, but too late, with a dramatic splash that would have made the front page of any Sunday tabloid. Sandra fell straight into the lake, fully dressed, wide-brim hat and all. The cops froze. Craig gasped, but he barked twice. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. She surfaced seconds later, gasping, spitting water, arms flailing. "Get me out of here," she screeched. Craig leaned down and tried to help her up, but the dock kept tipping, threatening to dump him in, too. I casually walked over and held out my hand. She slapped it away. "You did this," she screamed. I backed up, arms raised. "Ma'am, I don't control gravity, but I do control the marina. Now, so, maybe we should talk about swimming lessons in the HOA budget next year." But what happened next was even crazier than the splash. Because while everyone was focused on Sandra soaking in my lake, a black SUV pulled up fast to the road. A man in a navy suit stepped out holding a briefcase. He was from the county and he had news that would change everything again. The man in the navy suit shut his car door with a soft thunk and started walking toward us like he owned the earth under his shoes. His polished loafers crushed the gravel, briefcase swinging at his side, his expression calm but unreadable. He looked about mid-40s, clean-shaven, and carried the energy of someone who didn't like repeating himself. Everyone paused, even Sandra, who was still soaked and flailing in the water like a furious walrus. "Who the hell is this now?" Craig grumbled, wiping sweat from his forehead. The suited man stopped a few feet from me and extended his hand. "Mr. Foster?" he asked. "Name's Daniel Clean. I'm with the County Zoning and Land Development Office." I shook his hand. "Pleasure. I assume this isn't a social visit." "No," he said plainly. "We received a formal complaint from the Sunridge Hollow HOA regarding the presence of an unauthorized maritime structure on inland private property." I sighed. "Let me guess. They said I built an illegal marina." He nodded. "They did. But before this escalates into anything larger, I need to clarify a few things with you." Behind me, Sandra was now climbing onto the dock like a dripping cartoon villain, her hat flattened against her shoulder. Craig tried to dry her off with his sleeve, but she pushed him aside. "You're too late," she barked at the man in the suit. "We already submitted emergency claims for lake jurisdiction, vessel removal, and an HOA perimeter extension." "Arrest him." Daniel calmly opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I've reviewed the documents. I also pulled zoning records, property, plat, and the legal deed history for this land." He glanced at Sandra with cold precision. "There's no violation here." The air snapped. Sandra's jaw dropped. Craig stepped back like he'd been hit with an invisible brick. "What do you mean there's no violation?" Sandra screeched. Daniel looked her square in the eye. "This lake is entirely within Mr. Foster's parcel. It is not subject to HOA boundaries, overlays, or bylaws. It's a registered private body of water with no public access requirement. As for the yacht, it is docked legally on his property with no commercial use. There's no law against owning a yacht on your own lake." Sandra's hands balled into fists. "Then why did you come?" "I came," he said, "because your HOA has filed 17 nuisance claims in the past 3 months alone. All dismissed." Craig gasped. "That's confidential." "Not when it wastes county resources," Daniel snapped. The moment was delicious. Even the officers started exchanging amused glances like kids who'd been told they could finally leave detention. Daniel turned back to me. "Mr. Foster, there is one more matter," he said, lowering his voice. "About your recent acquisition of the Sunridge Marina." My ears perked up. He flipped open a separate folder and handed me a sheet of paper. "There's an expired environmental compliance report attached to the marina's previous management. It never got updated. If the HOA had purchased it, they'd be responsible. But since you now own the marina, it falls on you." I looked at the document. "Environmental hazard evaluation pending." "Is it serious?" I asked. "Could be," he said. If there's evidence of water contamination or failure to comply with runoff regulations, the county could fine the property owner. Worst case, temporary closure until rectified. Now that got Craig's attention. He smirked, suddenly regaining color in his cheeks. Well, 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 he sang. Looks like the big man forgot to do his homework. Enjoy your broken Marina, Derek. I stayed calm, because what Craig didn't know was that I had done my homework. You said the report was filed under previous management, I asked Daniel. Yes, then you might want to check the timestamp again. He blinked. Excuse me. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a folded slip. The receipt from the environmental consulting firm I'd hired a week before finalizing the purchase. I handed it over. Inspection done 3 days ago, I said. All clear. They emailed it directly to the zoning office. Maybe it just hasn't been logged yet. Daniel scanned the document. His eyebrows lifted. I'll verify with the office, but if this checks out, you're ahead of the curve. Craig's smirk vanished. Sandra, now dripping and red-faced, yelled. He's manipulating everything. This is an attack on the HOA. No, Daniel said, shutting his folder. This is a man protecting his rights, something your HOA should review in its next board meeting. Then he turned to leave, and just as the gravel crunched under his shoes again, he paused and added, Oh, and your HOA license to host community events at the Marina. It expired last month. You'll have to reapply. The silence that followed was pure art. Now, let me tell you, after all that drama, most people would have thrown a barbecue to celebrate. Me, I just went back inside and fed my dogs. Peace doesn't need to be loud, but peace didn't last long because the very next morning, I got a knock on my door at sunrise. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't Craig or Sandra. It was a delivery crew, and they had a letter, a legal notice. Apparently, the HOA had one last trick up their sleeve. And this time, it wasn't about the lake. It was about my house. The knock on the door was heavy. 3 solid thuds that echoed through my quiet ranch house like a drum line announcing bad news. Buddy and Samson barked as I shuffled to the front door, coffee mug in hand, still in my robe and slippers. Outside stood 2 men in matching blue jumpsuits, a white pickup truck parked behind them with a roll of orange construction tape in the bed. You Derek Foster? The taller one asked, flipping through a clipboard. I nodded. That's me. He handed me a thick envelope. We were instructed to post this notice and assess the property per request of the Sunridge Hollow HOA Enforcement Board. They claimed unresolved code violations. I blinked. Code violations on a private ranch. That's new. He shrugged. We just follow orders. We're from county compliance. They filed it overnight. I tore open the envelope. Scanning quickly. The document inside listed 9 supposed infractions. Some were comical: unpermitted exterior lighting, excessive reflective surfaces on watercraft, and unauthorized flagpole height. My favorite was the one that claimed my barbecue grill posed a wildfire threat due to visible blackening on the smoker stack. I snorted. They're really reaching now. But then I saw something that made my stomach twist. The last page, temporary land use freeze and property reassessment request filed for review. They weren't trying to fine me. They were trying to lock me out of any changes to my property, including upgrades, construction, landscaping, and more. It was a dirty tactic. Slow me down, tie me up in red tape, make the yacht unlivable by choking access and making life complicated. I stepped outside, eyes narrowing at the workers stringing orange tape along my front fence like I was some kind of fugitive, and right on cue, a sleek black car pulled up. Of course, Sandra Wilde stepped out like she was about to pose for a perfume ad. Even though she'd nearly drowned the day before, she was back in full form. Blazer, brooch, sunglasses, clipboard. Craig was in the passenger seat smirking behind the glass. Good morning, Mr. Foster, Sandra called out, voice sugary. We're simply following up on standard HOA complaints. We cared deeply about safety, appearance, and community values. I raised my voice just enough. You filed fake violations. They're concerns, she said. Every homeowner must be held accountable. I'm not in your HOA. Her smile widened like a cracked plate. But you border us, and the county gives us limited input on bordering aesthetics. I took a step closer. This is harassment. She tilted her head. This is civic duty. Craig rolled down his window and added, should have moved the yacht, Derek. Buddy growled low behind me, his eyes locked on Craig. I took a deep breath. I didn't want to lose my cool. That's what they wanted. Instead, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I never thought I'd need. Hey, Angela, I said when she picked up. It's Derek. Remember when you said if I ever needed a favor, you'd be there? She laughed. Of course. You saved my father's barn from burning down in '09. What do you need? I need you to help me file for a harassment and nuisance injunction against an HOA. There was a pause. Then I'm on my way. Angela Brown was a real estate attorney and a pit bull in heels. We'd gone to high school together, and she never forgot the time I risked my life in a storm to save her family's animals during a wildfire. She was smart, fast, and had no patience for petty bureaucracy. I hung up the call and looked Sandra straight in the eyes. You're not going to like what happens next. She didn't respond. But Craig leaned out and said, you should have just stayed quiet, old man. Enjoy the freeze. Then they drove off. The next few hours were frustrating. The county workers finished taping off portions of my property. They didn't shut anything down officially, but they made notes and took pictures of everything from my barn to my solar panels. But I kept calm. I had a plan. That evening, Angela showed up, black SUV, heels clicking, binder in hand. We sat on my porch while the sun dipped below the horizon, going over every document, every email, every letter I'd received. She clicked her tongue. This isn't just harassment, Derek. This is targeted legal aggression. And if you let me take it to court, we'll not only stop it, we'll make them pay for it. I nodded. Good, but I wasn't done. I had one more card to play. Angela asked, you mentioned you were planning something big. I grinned. Yeah, the HOA's annual summer jubilee is in 3 weeks. Right. She nodded. It's their biggest event of the year. Well, I said, sipping my tea, now that I own the Marina, they have to rent the space from me. They've already started advertising. Angela raised an eyebrow. You're not going to cancel it, are you? I shook my head. Oh no. I'm going to let them run their whole event, set up tents, invite guests, roll out their stupid red carpet. She leaned in, and then I smiled. I'm going to change the locks the night before. Angela burst into laughter. You devil. I shrug. They picked a fight. But the real shock came the next morning, because just as we were wrapping up our plans, I got a notification on my phone. One of my security cameras had picked up movement at the Marina. I tapped into the live feed and froze. Craig. He was at the back gate of the Marina, with bolt cutters in hand and to other HOA members behind him, trying to sneak in. I zoomed in on the video, my heart racing. They weren't just trespassing. They were unloading equipment, sound equipment, tents, coolers. They were trying to host the Jubilee early without permission on my property. I stared at the live security feed in disbelief. There they were, Craig, Sandra, and to other HOA board members wheeling in foldable tables and hauling a speaker system through the back gate of the Marina I legally owned. They thought they were slick. They probably assumed I wasn't watching. Or, B, they figured I'd never notice if they set everything up a few days early. But I saw everything. The bolt cutters were still swinging from Craig's hand. They had snapped the lock I'd installed less than a week ago. That wasn't just trespassing. That was breaking and entering. I stood up from the porch chair so fast, I knocked over my coffee. Angela, still sitting across from me with legal papers on her lap, asked, what happened? I turned the tablet toward her. Look. Her eyes narrowed. Are they breaking in? They're not just breaking in. I growled. They're setting up for the Jubilee. Angela's fingers flew to her phone. We need to call the sheriff's office now. This is criminal trespass with intent to use private property. But I held up a hand. Not yet. She blinked. What do you mean not yet? Let them finish. Angela gave me a confused look. Finish what? I walked to my truck and grabbed my drone controller. Let them set up everything. The lights, the tents, the food, the decorations. Let them think they've gotten away with it. Angela smirked slowly. You're playing the long game. I launched my drone and sent it buzzing high over the trees toward the marina. The aerial footage confirmed everything. They had already set up 3 large tents. Tables were covered in red and white cloths, and I could see boxes of bottled water, decorations, and something that looked suspiciously like a rented popcorn machine. I recorded everything, footage from every angle. They were deeply invested in this event. Angela's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. The sheriff's office called me back. They said they'll dispatch deputies, but want us to file the trespass report in person first. I nodded. We'll go, but let's give it just one more day. I want them to dig themselves deeper. Angela closed her binder. All right, but when this blows, it's going to explode. The next morning, I drove by the marina casually. In my old pickup, I wore a fishing hat and sunglasses and didn't even stop. Just rolled past slow enough to see the magic they'd brought in. Banners now, Sunridge Summer Jubilee, a celebration of community. Funny thing was, nowhere on that banner did it say by permission of the marina owner, because they didn't have permission. Sandra was directing traffic like a wedding planner on caffeine. Craig stood near the main gate, clipboard in hand, yelling at some volunteers about table alignment. They were all smiles. They had no idea they were on camera. No idea I'd filmed them forcing the back lock open. No idea their little event was about to become my event. Angela met me later that afternoon at the sheriff's office. We submitted the full complaint, including photos, drone footage, timestamp security recordings, and a copy of the marina title deed with my name on it. The deputy who took the file raised an eyebrow. This is one of the most organized trespass claims I've ever seen. I smiled. I had time, Angela added. We're requesting an official cease and desist be served by morning and a patrol car present the night of the event. The deputy nodded. We can do that. Now, here's where it got really good. See, I had a plan B just in case the sheriff's team arrived too late or the HOA tried to deny everything. I called my friend Edric, a local DJ with a booming speaker system and a dramatic flair. Hey, Ed, I said, how'd you like to DJ a surprise party? He laughed. Surprise for who? You'll find out. The night before the Jubilee, everything was set, and I do mean everything. The HOA had turned my marina into a red, white, and blue playground. Lights were strung up. Food trucks lined the road. A banner hung between 2 trees reading, Community Excellence Starts With Us. But then came the moment. 8:47 p.m. I pulled up slowly, headlights off. Angela was already parked across the street, watching from a distance. Sandra and Craig were at the gate going over the final guest list with walkie-talkies in hand. I walked up casually and said, Evening. Sandra blinked. You again. Craig rolled his eyes. You're trespassing on our event, Foster. I chuckled. Actually, you're trespassing on my property. I have the sheriff's cease and desist order right here. I pulled out the folded papers and held them up. Craig snatched them out of my hand and read the first few lines, and his face went pale. Sandra snatched it from him and read it, too. By authority of County Sheriff Office the 3498, this is to inform all current occupants that unauthorized use of private property, specifically the Sunridge Marina parcel ID 9219B, constitutes criminal trespass and is hereby ordered to cease immediately. She looked up stunned. This is a joke. Angela stepped forward from the shadows holding a camcorder. Oh, it's very real. I'd smile if I were you. This is going on record. Just then, the patrol car pulled up behind us, red and blue lights flashing. Sandra stumbled back. Craig looked like he was going to faint. The deputy stepped out and said calmly, "Whose event is this?" Craig opened his mouth, then shut it. I raised my hand. "Technically, it's on my land." The deputy nodded. "Then they'll have to leave or you can press charges." I looked at Sandra. I looked at Craig and I said, "Tell you what, you have 20 minutes to pack it all up or I'll let the whole neighborhood watch you get booked in cuffs." Craig muttered something under his breath, and they scrambled. It was beautiful. Tents collapsed. Balloons popped. Food trays tossed into coolers. Decorations torn down like a failed parade. Guests arriving were turned around at the gate. It was chaos, glorious chaos, but I wasn't done. At exactly 9:30 p.m., after they'd all left in shame, I had Edric roll in with his van. I set up my own lights, plugged in my speakers, and started my celebration. I called it the first annual Free Ranch Jubilee. No HOA, no rules, just neighbors from nearby farms, ranches, and houses, not Sunridge Hollow, dancing, laughing, eating barbecue under the stars. But as the music boomed and people cheered, my phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. It read, "Enjoy the moment. You may have won this battle, but the HOA board just voted unanimously to take it further. Next stop, civil court." I stared at the message because I knew exactly what that meant. They were going to sue me. The message sat on my screen like a glowing snake. "Enjoy the moment. You may have won this battle, but the HOA board just voted unanimously to take it further. Next stop, civil court." I handed the phone to Angela. She read it, scoffed, and tossed her braid over her shoulder. "So, they want war. Fine, but they picked the wrong cowboy." We were still standing at the Marina, now transformed into a sea of laughter and music from my Free Ranch Jubilee. Neighbors were line dancing near the dock, teenagers splashing water at the edge of the lake, and Buddy was getting a full plate of ribs from someone's grandma. But in the middle of all that joy, I knew the HOA wasn't going to let this go. They were humiliated twice. First by the yacht, then by getting booted off the marina they'd used for years. And now they were going to try what Karens do best, weaponize the courtroom. "They're going to sue me for what?" I muttered, walking with Angela toward the food tent. "Owning my own land too hard. They'll find something," she said, already typing into her phone. "False claims, misuse of commercial property, emotional distress, probably. You'd be shocked what petty people can dream up." I wasn't worried about court. I was worried about distraction. Every hour spent in hearings paying lawyers or dealing with paperwork would take me away from the ranch, away from peace. And that was exactly what they wanted, a long, slow bleed. Angela handed me a bottle of water. "We'll countersue if it comes to that. I'll file harassment, defamation, and abuse of process." I looked out across the marina. The fairy lights reflected off the water like stars dancing. "They're going to throw the whole HOA handbook at me," I said, "and hope I get tired." She smirked. "They don't know you like I do." But Angela was right. The HOA's next step wasn't about winning. It was about wearing me down. Sure enough, 2 days later, I got served. A stiff man in khakis handed me a fat envelope with a fake, polite smile. "Mr. Foster, you've been named in a civil lawsuit filed by the Sunridge Hollow Homeowners Association Board." Angela opened it while I kept feeding my chickens. Her face hardened. "They're suing you for creating a nuisance adjacent to the community," she said. "And get this, deliberately weaponizing ownership to inflict emotional damage." I blinked. They made me sound like I turned a yacht into a missile. Angela kept reading. "They're requesting injunctions, damages, and an order for the county to reassess your land use classification." I leaned against the chicken coop. Translation: "They want to strip me of my right to run this place how I want." "Exactly," she said. "They're hoping to scare you into settling." I nodded. So, we hit back. That same day, Angela filed a response. Then, we went further. We filed a counterclaim, documented every interaction, letter, and ambush I'd received over the past year. Even found witnesses, former residents of Sunridge Hollow, who'd sold their homes early because of the HOA's toxic behavior. One man even showed up with a binder labeled HOA Craziness Vulner. As news of the lawsuit spread through town, people started talking. A local radio host picked it up. One of the neighbors came by just to shake my hand and say, "About time someone stood up," to that bunch. But it was the third day after being served when things truly hit the fan. I was pulling weeds near the lake when I heard the rumble of a diesel engine. A huge delivery truck rolled up to the Marina gates. The driver hopped out with a clipboard. "Morning. Got a delivery for Sunridge Hollow. Stage equipment, chairs, audio rig." I frowned. "They have something planned again." "Not sure, sir. I was told to set up by Friday." I took a step forward. "This is private property. There's no reservation on file, and the HOA doesn't own this land." He scratched his head. "You're the owner?" "Yeah, Derek Foster." The guy palled it a little. "Well, you better talk to the lady in the van. She's in charge." I walked around the truck, and there she was. Sandra in full power pose mode, clipboard on her lap, sipping an iced latte like she owned the sky. When she saw me, she smiled like a cat that just caught a hummingbird. "Derek, I thought you'd be on vacation." I crossed my arms. "What's this about?" "Community Talent Showcase," she said cheerfully. "We're going to host it right here." "No, you're not." She raised an eyebrow. "Actually, we are." "You see, I found a loophole." She pulled out a folded contract and waved it. "According to this document, Sunridge Hollow signed a lease for annual marina access 10 years ago. It automatically renews unless formally canceled." I took it, scanned it quickly, and froze. She was right. I had missed this. The previous owner had signed an automatic lease. I had assumed all past agreements were voided with the sale. But this clause technically rolled forward unless specifically terminated 90 days prior, which I hadn't done. My stomach dropped. Angela, standing beside me, took the paper and read it carefully. "This might give them temporary access, but it doesn't give them exclusive use and certainly not permission to throw a full showcase event without coordination." Sandra was glowing. "We've already sold tickets," she said sweetly. "Hundreds high profile. Yes, newspaper coverage. You cancel this and you'll look like the villain." I grit my teeth. I couldn't stop them outright yet, but I could still make it hard. Angela said under her breath, "We'll challenge this, file an emergency appeal. But, in the meantime," I nodded slowly, "I'll let them set up." Sandra grinned. "Wonderful." She walked away smugly, barking orders to the crew as they began unloading tents and building the stage. Angela turned to me. "You okay?" I looked out at the lake. My lake, the one I dug with my hands, the marina I bought to protect my peace. And now these people were parading on it like it was theirs. I clenched my fists. "They want to showcase," I muttered. Angela blinked. "What? Then let's give them a showcase." Angela narrowed her eyes. "You're planning something." "Oh," I said, smiling darkly, "I'm going to showcase something they'll never forget." She crossed her arms. "Should I be concerned?" "Only if you hate surprises." And that night, under the glow of moonlight, I started preparing my final move. One that would turn their precious showcase into a reckoning. The night before the Sunridge Hollow Community Talent Showcase, I barely slept, but I wasn't tired. I was ready. Every hour of their smug grins and every HOA letter stuffed in my mailbox. Every lie, every trespass, every time they called the county on me for simply existing. I remembered it all. And I was done playing defense. They wanted a war. Then I was going to give them a war with paperwork truth and a little Texas-style flair. At exactly 6 a.m. I pulled on my boots, grabbed a thick manila folder from my desk drawer, and made a quiet call to Deputy Howard, the local sheriff's liaison. He was fair and didn't care much for HOA politics. He also loved the law. Morning. Deputy, I said. Just sent you something by email. It's urgent. Let me check, he muttered. Then after a pause whistled. Well, I'll be. Where'd you get this? From the county archive, I replied. Angela dug it up last night. We drove 2 hours to get it. He chuckled. They ain't going to like this. That's the idea. After I hung up, I drove to the Marina slowly, sipping my coffee as the morning sun rose behind the hills. I could already see movement down by the lake. Sunridge HOA had gone all out. Colorful tents, folding chairs in neat rows, a small stage with shiny blue fabric, even one of those tall inflatables that flail around like they're having a seizure. Vendors were unloading food, and someone was testing a microphone on stage. Check. Check. Sunridge loves you, baby. I parked near the gate, and there she was. Sandra Wilds in a cherry red pantsuit, clipboard in hand, barking into a headset like she was directing a Broadway show. Craig stood nearby adjusting some streamers and yelling at teenagers to move faster. When Sandra spotted me, her smile tightened. Well, come to enjoy the show. I didn't say a word. I walked straight to the edge of the crowd, raised one hand, and whistled. Everyone froze. Even the inflatable guy stopped moving for a second. Deputy Howard's cruiser rolled up behind me with his lights off, but his siren ready. Angela stepped out of the passenger seat, looking every bit like a courtroom storm in jeans and boots. Sandra walked toward us. What is this? What are you doing? Angela answered. This event is canceled. Craig stepped forward, puffing his chest. You can't cancel us. We have a legal lease. I nodded. You did, but it expired at midnight. He frowned. No, it renews automatically every year. Angela smiled. Unless the owner files a land use and ownership reassignment termination, which Mr. Foster did. Sandra's mouth opened. I didn't see any. I filed it in the county courthouse last night, I said. Stamped, certified, logged, took a trip down there, myself. We waited until the 90-day cutoff passed, then filed a retroactive reassignment. Since the prior owner no longer holds authority, and you didn't get written renewal from the new owner, the lease isn't valid. Deputy Howard pulled out the printed court-stamped document from his file folder. You can verify this with the county clerk, he added. But, as of now, this land is closed to public use without the express consent of the owner. Which they don't have, Angela said. Which you'll never have, I added. The microphone on stage squealed as someone accidentally turned it up too loud. You could hear a pin drop. Sandra's cheeks turned bright pink. But we sold tickets. Guests are coming. This is community outreach. Angela tilted her head. Then maybe you should have asked the community before stealing someone's land. Craig hissed. You planned this, waited until the last second. That's right, I said calmly, because if I had stopped you sooner, I wouldn't have this. I pulled a USB drive from my pocket. Drone footage, audio recordings, security cam time lapses, proof that you and your board trespassed, broke my locks, moved in equipment, and sold access to private property. Angela handed a printed packet to Deputy Howard. We're filing formal charges this afternoon. Sandra took a step back. No, this isn't happening. You tried to ruin my name, I said. Tried to ruin my peace. You filed false reports, weaponized the system, broke into my property, and played victim every step of the way. Deputy Howard lifted a hand. All attendees need to vacate the premises. Vendors must pack up. This is now considered an active civil matter and a pending investigation. Failure to comply could result in arrest. And just like that, it all unraveled. The DJ unplugged his system. The kids started pulling down decorations. A woman with a tray of lemonade muttered, "Well, this is awkward," and walked off. Sandra's headset fell to the ground. Craig turned away and kicked a folding chair. As the crowd thinned, Angela turned to me. You good? I exhaled. Yeah, just tired of pretending like bullies should be tolerated because they wear suits. You think they'll stop now? I paused, looked over at Sandra, arms folded, trembling with rage, but too embarrassed to speak. They might try something else, I said, but I think I just reminded them who they're messing with. Angela grinned. So, what now? I'm going to take the yacht out for a ride, I said. Let the dog sit up front. Maybe throw some jazz on the speakers. You earned it. And as I walked back to the lake, Buddy and Samson trailing behind me, I heard Sandra shout one last desperate thing across the lawn. You haven't seen the last of us. I turned, smiled, and waved. I hope not. I called back. I've still got a few surprises left. And with that, I climbed aboard my yacht, untied the ropes, and let it drift across the still, quiet lake. My lake, my home, a ranch, a yacht, and a man who wouldn't be pushed. If you enjoyed this story, let me ask, have you ever dealt with an HOA gone wild? Drop your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more revenge tales that prove the good guys still win, one peaceful lake at a time.